I'm very honored to be here. My husband appeared here every year, and it was his last appearance just before he passed away, where he shared his experiences of what it meant to be a victim of communism and what it meant to fight that evil force in our world. Speaking to my friends associated with the victims of communism is always an opportunity for reflection, sorrow, and gratitude. To the victims of communism who are here today, how grateful we are to be together with you. Many still suffer under the yoke of communist regimes. It's a tribute to you and to this organization that you continue to raise your voices, decrying the ongoing injustice and oppression that are the fruits of communist totalitarian governments everywhere. Simultaneously, we honor the martyrs and innocent ordinary people who have been victims of communism in the past. It is vital that we, people who have experienced the violence and oppression of communism, continue to keep those sad memories alive for our children, grandchildren, and even our great-grandchildren. There is a temptation to simply forget. David Satter, an expert on Soviet Russia and its transition from communism, has written a book. I think even its brilliant title is very threatening. It's called "It Was a Long Ago and It Never Really Happened." Apparently, this is an aphorism in Russia. How easy it is to simply ignore the lessons of history, and how distressingly easy it is to repeat them. The Soviets, by refusing to forget and to let our government and people forget the horrors of the all too recent past and the ongoing treachery which communism is inflicting on our brothers and sisters in Tibet, China, and North Korea, to name just a few of the sites of current communist abuses, are inflicting a tremendous injustice on people. Many years ago, when my late husband, Tom Lantos, in his professional incarnation, was teaching at San Francisco State University, a well-known American communist was invited to speak at the local junior college. There was a major uproar in our suburban community. People were outraged that the minds of our youth should be exposed to such pernicious ideas at school. But Tom came forward and insisted there was no reason to be upset. This communist can and should speak, but not unchallenged. Dr. Lantos, as he was then commonly known, said, "We can have a debate." Tom was an outspoken anti-communist, and with reason and truth in his arsenal, he roundly defeated the arguments of his communist rival and allowed the students to compare the visions and the reality of the two systems. I think we all wish we lived in much less selfish societies, where prosperity was available to everyone and where great disparities in poverty, hunger, and wealth were eliminated. But any noble ideas of this godless system of government are obscured completely by communism's commitment to deprive people of what is most valuable, the only thing that is inherently our own, our freedom of thought, of action, of faith, and of choice. Communist ideas and communism's reality do not intersect. Its practice is rife with abuse, from forced labor and abortion to forced cultural assimilation. Its practice isn't about people coming together and choosing to improve one another's lives. Those with access to power continue to enjoy the benefits of a class system, while the vast majority of the proletariat is forced to live in circumstances that strip away their basic human rights. And that majority has little or no ability to improve their situation. The problem with communism is an ideology that can only be maintained through fear, intimidation, and indoctrination. There is no room for differing opinions. There is no room for dissent. There is no room for compromise. Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot, and other communist tyrants have visited unspeakable atrocities upon their own people, as have the fascist tyrants like Hitler and the Arrow Cross and others on the far right. In our case, in my husband's case and my case, we experienced both the evils of communism and fascism in rapid succession. After the Nazis murdered most of Tom's family, as well as my own, we became subject to the devastation of communism. Its suffocating effect on our family's effort to rebuild after Hitler is described in the following excerpt from my memoirs, which my daughter will read to you now.
In view of the horrific examples we've heard today, this is a very mild example of how communism nevertheless insidiously undermines freedom and the very spirit of the people who have to live under its burden. Sorry. Sorry. Okay. These are excerpted from my mother's memoirs, which she has very wonderfully kept for us and her family in particular. And it covers a period between in Hungary after World War II, between 1945 and 1948. My mother had returned. She was able to escape Hungary through the efforts of Raoul Wallenberg, and she returned to see who remained of her family, and she found very few people. Hungary in the winter of 1945 was an amazing place, full of paradoxes. Budapest was in ruins. The once glittering boutiques were derelict, and the magnificent bridges spanning the Danube lay broken. There was a feeling of death and destruction and fear. But strangely, there was also a feeling of exuberance, a celebration which affirmed life in the midst of death, like a big feast after a funeral. There was loss, but also the exhilaration of being alive and having a second chance. The Russians did not rush to impose their straitjacket systems on the countries they occupied. Realizing the need for private initiative and enterprise to revive the economy, they allowed people to do what they could in the midst of their poverty and devastation. This was all the irrepressible people of Budapest needed. As soon as they had a modicum of freedom, they rushed to rebuild their shattered lives. My uncle Ernő, a dashing former officer in the Hungarian military, was delighted when I came home. Though I was only 14 and without experience, he put me in charge of my father's, her late father's at this point, once famous jewelry store. The store was, of course, ravaged, but its nameplate and great reputation were still in place. We cleared out 2 of the 12 show windows. We washed and scrubbed a small part of the relatively intact interior. We found cabinets and a gold scale with weights, which we could use to weigh the gold people would bring in to sell. And once we cleared the debris which blocked the front door, we declared ourselves open for business. Almost as soon as the sign went up, people started coming, looking for my father. But when they found out what had happened, they implicitly trusted me in his stead. Business was brisk and booming. Meanwhile, my uncle started mixing the delicious liqueurs my grandfather used to manufacture before the war. He was able to get the ingredients he needed from the countryside, and I began converting the money he made selling the liqueur into gold in our shop. And so we began our crude but exciting little capital formation. 3 years later, however, the communists were beginning to surface their real intention, which remains always the same, whether they take over Vietnam, Poland, or Hungary. After consolidation of power, clamp down on all freedoms and establish a ruthless tyranny, and an all-powerful establishment made up of a minority of revolutionaries, always in the name of the proletariat. Uncle Ernő had been doing brisk business with his liquor store during the Christmas season of 1948, and the general mood of businessmen in Budapest was very upbeat. There was a feeling that finally normalcy was returning, and real prosperity was just around the corner. Then, on Christmas Eve, the business of the day was winding down, the gifts to the employees had been distributed, good wishes exchanged, and the money counted and put into neat stacks to be taken to the bank after the holiday. Just as he finished his business, the door suddenly opened and 2 men in suits, accompanied by an armed policeman, entered the store. They told Uncle Ernest, as they did to every other private business and factory owner in the country, to hand over the key to the store, all of the money, all of the documents, all of the books. They introduced him to the person who is now in charge of the enterprise and warned him to never again set foot on the property, at pain of instant arrest and deportation. There was very little resistance. The beleaguered businessmen of the country were used to hostile and criminal governments depriving them of life, liberty, and property. Law, order, justice, and freedom were always momentary and exceptional, usually occurring by happenstance in transitional periods, not something to be taken for granted as a right. Uncle Erne realized that the severe persecution of the unjustly deprived victims would follow. When he tried to return to his apartment just to pack up a few things, he found the door padlocked. His old nanny explained that the police had been there earlier and had told her to pack up a few of her own belongings and move down to the stable, because the apartment in which she lived with Uncle Erne had been requisitioned for the proletariat. They didn't even allow her to get a clean shirt and socks for Erne, so he was now a homeless, penniless fugitive with only the shirt on his back to show for 3 years of hard labor. A small offense in the panoply and mosaic we've heard today, and nevertheless it gives us insight into the way that not only on a large scale, but on a deep and personal, intimate scale, communism devastates not only individuals, but the spirit of a nation.
Extremes of the political spectrum are more passionate about political issues than those in the middle, who are more concerned about putting food on the table, keeping bills paid, and finding a way to get the kids through college. Leaders have a responsibility to that diverse and silent majority. My husband always said the world is like a book, and if you never travel, it is as if you have only read a single page. Similarly, if we only care about our own national interest, we are blind and dumb to the broader implication of our decision. With international trade, with Facebook, with the technological developments outpacing the legislative progress, every decision we make has an implication far beyond the obvious. From the food we choose to eat, the clothing to wear, to the activities we participate in, to the places where we work, to the people we marry and vote for, each of these decisions has broad-ranging social, economic, environmental, and cultural impact. Our country isn't perfect, but unlike victims of communism worldwide, we not only have the right but the duty to stand up in the name of justice, in the name of compassion, in the name of faith, and in the name of freedom. We have the right and the duty to care for our brothers and sisters who are less fortunate. We have the duty and right to defend the defenseless, to speak for the voiceless, to help the helpless. How seriously do you take that duty? How seriously do I take that duty? As we are remembering our brothers and sisters who are victims of communism, let us remember neighbors, be they Christians, Jews, atheists or Muslims, Syrians or Swedish. I ask you and I ask myself to commit to take full advantage of the freedoms we have to serve one another. Passion and communism, Albert Einstein observed, a human being is a part of a whole called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of an optical delusion of consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature and its beauty.